This episode is proudly brought to you by Optimum Financial Services Group. Optimum has the expertise to guide you through investment, tax, retirement, and estate planning, with a tailored solution to your individual needs. Our objective is to provide you with an optimum solution to protect your wealth. Optimum has expertise in medical aid, legal services, asset finance, and short-term insurance, as well as specialized services in commercial, marine, aviation, and personal liability. Don't choose the average, choose Optimum. Optimum Financial Services Group is an authorized financial services provider. Well, good afternoon to you. Welcome to the show. Sorry about being a couple of minutes late. Had a few technical snags to sort out, and I'll talk about it in a minute once Bryan joins us too. Very excited to have Bryan Roseveare join us. Captain Bryan Roseveare, captain at South African Express Airways, 10 years in the airline, and he's been running his own show for 2 years now. And excited to have a chat, all things flying, all things anxiety about, do I have a job, don't I have a job? And of course, podcasting and sharing the good message, positive news, and having a following. So without further ado, let's bring on Captain Bryan Roseveare. My name's Alex McPhail, and this is High Performance Teams. Bryan, welcome to the show. We were just talking a second ago about being live and the stress that goes with it. And sure, how are you doing today?
Alex, pleasure to be on your show. Thanks for inviting me, man.
No, it's awesome. So quickly, just for the listeners who were wondering what's going on while we were late, I'm in the temporary location at the moment, and there's an aerial on the roof which boosts the signal so we can have an upload speed. And I suddenly realized that my stuff was not uploading as we were testing a minute ago. I had to quickly get a ladder, extend it to the full roof height, and then climb up to the roof and go and swing the aerial and quickly run back down and back to you again. So that's the risks you take with going live. But for me, it's a risk worth taking. You don't have that on your show.
Yeah, I was just saying to you off air now, you're a brave man for doing it all live. I'm not sure I'd have the guts to do it, but it's a whole new challenge, I suppose.
Yeah, it's different. It does bring out a different kind of challenge, and it's a bit like the, that feeling you get the last minute, the last 5 minutes getting things done, or studying for a test, or being ready for the sim, or any of those things where there's a time pressure involved. Going live has that repeatedly, which is, in some ways, it's a lot of fun, but definitely gets the adrenaline going.
It does, yeah. No, well, it's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Bryan, and thanks again for being here for short notice as well. Sometimes that also happens, another stress you've got to deal with. But let's, before we dive in too deep, let's just get a sense of where you're at, Bryan the pilot, Bryan the podcaster, Bryan the professional, and where did it all begin? Let's talk a couple of minutes of formative years in aviation. Your father's in aviation and great exposure as a kid. Tell me about that journey and what do you remember and how it shaped you as a youth.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Well, my dad ran a charter airline called Executive Aerospace. And to say an old cliche, I suppose I lived, ate, and breathed flying my whole life. So after school, of course, off to flight school. And I was extremely lucky because at the time, Executive Aerospace was operating a DC-9 aircraft. So I'm, I think, from a select few that went from flight school to the right seat of a DC-9 aircraft. And
not bad.
I had many, very, very lucky. And some of the happiest years of my life, I got to learn the trade from my dad. And while I was preparing last night, I was thinking back to those Executive Aerospace years. And wow, what a time it was. I mean, when you start rolling your eyeballs because you've got to go back to Victoria Falls for the third time in the month, you know you've got yourself a nice job. And I learned the trade from a few distinguished pilots there. Peter Ovenstone comes to mind, Tony Buston, and Paul Sear and the like. And I really learned my trade. At that time, Executive Aerospace offered sort of backup services to quite a few airlines. So I ended up doing quite a lot of flying for SA Express, actually, even before I started at SA Express. We we were operating the coastal routes on the DC-9. So about 3,000 hours or so I clocked up there, and I mean, what can I say? Things happened. The company started closing down.
Before you go too far there, I just want to make sure. So you said you learned the trade from your dad. Is he an instructor? Did he actually teach you as well?
Yeah, I did my first couple of flights with my dad on a Cherokee 140 there at Virginia Airport.
What a privilege!
And
wow.
He's a grade 2 instructor. He still instructs now at Sim Aero in Johannesburg. And but it's all those little soft skills, I think, that I was able to learn in the airline. Just the little things that you only really tend to pick up later in your career. I was very fortunate to pick up those little tips early on. So it definitely had a big positive influence on me.
Sure.
As fantastic as the job was, like all good things in life, it came to an end. Executive Aerospace was liquidated 2006. And
that must have been a tough time. Like, how long were you flying for them by that point when it was wound up?
Alex, it was about 4 years.
So you really settled in by then.
Yeah, I was very settled in and quite comfortable. I suppose I was a little bit of a brat as well. I had a nice job. Most of my friends I was at flight school with were fighting to fly a King Air 200, and I was very fortunate. And when things went bang there, I had a few difficult years. I didn't fly for a while. I was in a real limbo sort of phase, and I think that's possibly why, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, that something very similar happened with SA Express, and I suppose that's why I went on the proactive route this time instead of waiting for something to happen. And I think it all stems back from that Executive Aerospace closing down back then.
Okay, well, let's just pause there for a moment. I want to just bring in some of our friends and colleagues. Willem Nordeer saying hello, and this gentleman you may know. Ian Finley is joining us. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Your former boss.
Yeah.
Jordan's saying hello. Jordan, thanks for joining us again. And Larissa Mayer saying hello. Ex-colleague Bryan Roseveare and Alex. And Andrea Emke, well, thanks for joining us, and happy birthday for the other day, Andrea. I think it's great that you join, and she says she loves these success stories too. So, okay, I want to pick up on a couple of things there, and we may never get to what we're aiming for in this conversation, but you said something now which it struck a chord. So you said perhaps I was a bit of a brat, and there was some learning to do. Firstly, it would be it's a bit of a tragedy when your father or anyone has their business which falls over, and that's not a pleasant situation. But on a personal level, experiencing that hurt and pain from a relatively good position, being flying jets in a young age is awesome. You mentioned that at the beginning, and it's amazing. And to be sort of taken down a peg early on and taking the learnings out of it, I think that's the bit that really kind of shapes somebody. So maybe just talk me through, before we go a bit further off it, how long were you not flying for? That sort of crashing down to earth feeling. Like, how were you approaching life at that point?
Yeah, Alex, it was difficult. It was a difficult period. The whole liquidation obviously doesn't happen overnight. So it was a good year and a half sort of assisting my dad sort of, fold things up and basically close the company down. I bounced between one or two minor jobs. I ended up flying a Seneca 3 at one point, and obviously from a DC-9 to a Seneca 3, it's a knock to the system. But I suppose I'm incredibly grateful in a way that happened, because I have felt very prepared for what has happened now in our careers as pilots, and I suppose we'll get to that later. But it did take me down a peg or two.
So how old were you at that point? About 24 or so?
Yeah, it was about 20, 25-ish, yeah. Okay. In fairness to my dad, he he was trying to build the business, and when you look at it, I suppose any father wants to hand over a family business, but I think looking back at it now, he was very reluctant to do that. I think he in his mind, he was the business, and it was always on a knife edge as to how successful it could be. And I think he had it in his mind that if he handed this over in the state that it was, it might have been a bit of a headache for me. So he went out on the sort of funding route to try and get external funding and equity partners. And I think he had it in his mind that, listen, if he can't get the funding, the business can't carry on. So it wasn't a case of, just continuing for the sake of it. There was a need to get proper finance in there to keep things going.
Okay. And was he having conversations with you at the time, or you just wanting to fly jets and log hours? Was he talking business with you?
No, we were talking business. I've always been interested in the business side of things. I find it quite interesting. Yeah. A massive learning curve in terms of sort of dealing with people, because then you start to see, when things start getting tough in the company, then you really start to see who your friends are. And a few lonely years afterwards because of that, I suppose. But it was a shame. It was a wonderful company. Like I said, we flew to beautiful destinations.
Sure.
My dad is, anyone that knows him will know that he really enjoys life. And he wasn't about to go and put his aircraft in these difficult parts of the world like, so many contract aircraft are. We stuck to the high-end charters, Nice. Seychelles, Victoria Falls, all those beautiful places. So, it was a wonderful time.
Okay, all right. So I want to go back to that time now. So you mentioned lots of little odd jobs and things. So what was the longest period of time that you didn't fly for?
Alex, it was about 2.5 years.
Oh, wow. Between flights kind of thing? Just like keeping a license current every year kind of thing. That's about all.
Kept the license going, but... it just, at the time it wasn't that there weren't any jobs. There was the odd job going, but for one reason or another, I wasn't thinking back. I didn't have that keenness to go, start flying for an airline. And I suppose there's that whole grieving stage that I was going through, and it's a very real thing that I had to go through, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah, when you mentioned that earlier, I already started racing thoughts in my head, because at the time when I qualified, a bunch of us in the Air Force, we got our wings at the end of 2000. And there was a situation in the transport line where they had a string of accidents on the Taildragger, and they wanted to just pause the training and make, rightly so, take an assessment of what's going on, what's caused this spate of accidents over the previous 2 or 3 years, which they'd never seen before. They've been operating this airplane, the 185, for 40 years. They never saw a string of accidents like this. What happened? And they put it down to the fact that the Harvard was now gone, and now we trained at the Pilatus Astra, and they're no longer being given the wings on a Taildragger. You have to learn your first Taildragger after a year and nearly 200 hours of flying. So by the time you go into this thing, it's quite a handful to fly this 185. So anyway, it got all paused, and I spent, with a bunch of friends, we spent I think it was 9 months, certainly at least 8 months. Let's call it 8 months on the ground, no flying. And again, like you say, take it down a few pegs. For different reason. You were tied into the family business. Your dad, you're watching this role model. We just got qualified as, you just got your wings. Now you're an Air Force pilot, feeling great, leather jacket, sunglasses, watch, strutting the stuff. And they say, oh, by the way, you're not going to fly for a while. And a bit like COVID, there's no finish line. You're just not going to fly for a while. When do you think we're going to fly? Well, we'll get back to you. And this went on month by month by month. And I suppose there was a bit of grieving going on for me back then, and lessons learned that I haven't really thought about too often. I've thought about the fact that I had this injury in my career, but I didn't take any learnings necessarily out of it, but it must have played through for me now. And as you say, fast forward a few years and you're in a similar position, but you're a little bit better equipped. You've been around the block on this thing before. So, okay, so let's just fast forward to a time then now you are in an airline. And I remember watching your Bryan Air podcast going. You got your promotion to captain, and you celebrated that with some posts on LinkedIn, and that was great. And you shared a few posts afterwards, being a captain and talking about the crew. that must have been a wonderful time. And it was shortly thereafter that everything came crashing down again. Is it like, am I watching repeat, or what are you thinking at the time?
Exactly. It was a bit of a repeat, you know. Look, in one way, and I suppose you could relate to this as well, those of us at state-owned companies were never really in a full state of comfort, because, you know, you can only read so many damning news articles until it starts to have an effect on you. And I'd been on the edge for quite a while in terms of, I wonder if we're going to get paid next month, that sort of attitude, you know. So from being mentally prepared, I think I was mentally prepared. And a very sad time, because SA Express was a wonderful company to work for and fly for. A great bunch of people, superb training, and the management team that was put in place by Ian sort of early on, well, right at the beginning of January and before, was a good team that would have led the company well. Had COVID not come along, I'm pretty sure that we'd still be around. But yeah, as things go, company closed. Yeah.
Okay. And just for clarity's sake, so you're sitting in a position now where you're kind of not at SA Express, but you kind of are. Like there's no hard and fast end, but you see that the potential for what is there. There's nothing there looking in the future, and so you're in a position where you've got to, you know, move forward and do something else. But you've done this before, so tell me about the skills you picked up then and how you picked up the pace. I remember talking to you in March this year. And it was a tricky time for everyone. And I was reaching out, being new at this platform. And you said, look, I just need to put a few ducks in a row here. So what were the ducks you're putting in a row? How did you approach life, knowing that, well, there's no more salary and there's no more security and no more stability and the world's changed?
Yeah, Alex, it obviously was a difficult time for everyone. I did, I think, what every pilot did, and went into full autopilot mode. I went and got my logbook sorted out. I rewrote a CV and I sent it out to everyone that I could think of, because, you know, when you're not flying, the first thing you think of is, how do I get back into the air? So that was the first thing, until sort of one day I actually shot it out as a podcast just here in my room, and where I went just to thank everyone from SA Express. And it was after that I had to make a firm decision with myself to say, you know, regardless of what happens, for me, I'm now mentally checked out. I'm not going to talk about the past, and I'm going to be positive about the future. But if something's going to happen, if a success is going to be made of it, it's going to be me that's going to have to do it. No one's going to give it to me. So I'm certainly not saying that I've gone and found that success, but I certainly have got myself into a good mental, you know, part of my life to go and, you know, see what the future holds. And I'm quite excited about it.
Yeah, and tackling it. And well, I remember that post that you put out. You know, you made specific mention. I can't recall, something like 20 odd people on there. You know, you did this for me, and I remember working with you and this team, and it really was nice to see that. And you could read into it that this is some kind of a sort of a signing off message. You know, really thankful for the time you spent together, learned a lot, and value the friendships and the professional relationship. And it's time for me to let go a little bit and see what else there is. And certainly I can see from your demeanor, like you're in a space now where you might not be earning the salary that you earned, or maybe you're not earning a salary at all. You might not be a captain of an aircraft, you know, that command position where, you know, authority, etc. You might not have this glamorous walk through the airport terminal and swish off to fancy destinations, but you got to be feeling mentally quite strong and quite comfortable, knowing that you are offering value, because you're doing a great job. You and the team on Bryan Air are doing a great job, and isn't that what it's all about? Is to have that sense of worth, knowing that you're contributing to society and doing things that fulfills you.
Absolutely, Alex. You know, it's that you talked about that post, and that post for me was saying goodbye. And you know, it's all the little things. It's not the flying the aircraft as such. It's bumping into your friends inside the ops room. It's grabbing a mug and bean coffee on your way home and all those little things. But yeah, it's the Bryan Air podcast has been a real lifeline for me. It's been something that it's been a challenge. It's been hard at times. It's not comfortable always sitting in front of a microphone and a camera and shooting out your thoughts for an hour every week. But I think that's the point. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be hard, and it's supposed to have a steep learning curve. And it's been something that I can really dig my teeth into. And then, of course, you start getting the recognition. And I think if you can compare it to someone training for an event or someone that is, building up their body at gym, when you start seeing the results, that's when it starts becoming addictive. And when I started seeing the results in my mindset and the overall quality of the show improving week by week, then there's no stopping you. Then it's like a runaway train, and I just want that to continue.
That's great. Now, another friend and colleague joining us, Craig Woods, saying, "Hi, gents. I was on that Cessna 185 as an instructor on the work group that you mentioned about the Harvards. It was an aha moment when we linked the Astra replacing the Harvard without changing the syllabus." Well, thanks, Craig. I remember you were influential as an instructor at the time when I was really in my early days of flying. And Ian again saying, I think Bryan's promotion to captain, which is the last one he did. So well done. That must be quite a nice thing to have. That last one I found out with some other young and dynamic pilot managers, and the crash of SACS thereafter is probably the biggest bugbear I have over SACS closing. Yeah, you put a lot of effort in, Ian, as well, sort of trying to hold the baton and keep it all together in that top position as the head of flight operations. Difficult thing to swallow too. Andrea saying, what personality traits, if you can single out one or two specifically, drive you forward, Bryan? Can you think of something?
If I start something, I'm not going to stop. I would hate to, I wouldn't let myself down by saying I'm going to start you look at podcasts in general, I think most of them don't get beyond 7 or 8 episodes because, people call it quits. So I think I've got a bit of tenacity when it comes to continuing with something. Ian sent that message there. I mean, Ian I'm pretty sure that's what Ian wanted from me. He saw that tenacity in me, which is why I got that promotion, I think. And always ready to join him for a beer at the Baron after work on a Friday. But I think it's that tenacity, Alex, to answer that question.
I read up on podcasting. I'm getting my newly launched with the podcast and getting that Buzzsprout newsletter saying about podcasts and numbers and as you say, there's a lot of people that start and do 5, 6, 7 episodes and call it quits. There's lots of those that cover the vaults. But now let's talk a bit more specifically about podcasting and where you've been and where you're going and what's the plan. So last year, Bryan Air started. It was about the beginning of last year, 2019. What made you decide to kick that off? Was it the writing on the wall, or was it some other thing that you just thought, this is interesting?
I think obviously with the internet, so many jobs became available, more jobs than we were inclined to think. I always enjoy listening to podcasts. I was listening to a lot of them, and I was quite aware of the leverage that it offers. And I like to always say I'm passionate about African aviation or South African aviation. But then I thought, well, why don't I go and do something about that and actually produce a show? I don't know how to do it. It's going to be a learning curve. But I wanted that sort of challenge. And so it started off at purely that, a challenge. Let me see if I can do it. And, I had my dad on the first episode.
I remember, yeah. Nice 1-hour conversation. I'm still hoping to do that soon too. Not your dad, my dad.
But it was a nice thing for me, I mean, I can keep that little episode with me forever, and I'd like to do a few more with him. But as like anything, I was quite critical of the show itself, and I saw, for me, one of the things I didn't enjoy was, trying to get a guest on every week or every month. It's not always that easy, particularly when you've got a flying roster that you're trying to stick to as well.
Sure.
And I kind of let it evolve to, the only thing pilots enjoy more than flying is talking about flying. And if you think about the time you spent in the flight deck, you're always talking about what's going on. SAA are getting, A350s, and Airlink are doing this, and Safir are doing that. So, that's where the idea came. And said, hey, why don't we just carry on talking about that same stuff we spoke about in the flight deck? So, this year I tried to evolve the podcast into a more of a news-based format with a bit of sort of flight deck banter, if you could call it, thrown in. So, it evolved, and it's been great, man.
Okay, so in the beginning was the idea to learn a skill and then see where you go with that thing, and then as you learn the skill, you start putting things, you've got some more arrows in your quiver. You start to realize where this thing could be even more valuable. And then something we have in common there, like also I saw this opportunity for trying something new and learning. I bought myself a coffee machine. It's a 60 kilograms. You can't pick it up by yourself. Industrial coffee machine for a coffee shop, because I wanted to learn the skill of becoming a barista. And what better way than to just dive right in? And similarly with the show too, it's going live. It was something I'd never done before, and it was a way to learn a new skill and also keep up the skill of public speaking. People could ask questions and we could interact on a live show. I could be recorded. I could review it and work on my my delivery, work on my content, and make it more professional. And so it grows. And this, what are your thoughts on this? People often ask. So I had these great ideas, and how is that you got? How did you figure out what you needed to do, or what was the next step? What was the bit that led to those kind of typical questions? I mean, my answer to them is just start. You won't have all the answers yet. You don't know what the final look of the product is. You don't know what your business is called. But if someone's asking for something, if there's a positive response, then answer that. That's the market speaking, saying, yes, I want more. And as in podcasting, as well as I do, that you're not making money in podcasting. There may be some opportunity down the line, but you put in the hard yards now, you bank a volume of work, and you see where it takes you. What do you say to people when they say, like, how did you get going? How do you figure it all out? What is your response to somebody on those kind of questions?
Same as you, Alex. Just start. You've got to start. What's that saying? You don't need to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. And like with podcasting, I started off thinking it was just about the microphone. Then I worked out it was actually about your software that you use, and then I needed a better computer, and then I needed lighting if I was going to film, and then I needed a hosting site to actually host these things. So the learning curve is so big. But I was quite well aware that I was doing something difficult, and I was doing something that was probably, I'm not saying out of reach of other people, but certainly out of their comfort zone, and in particular, pilots. Pilots they like to fly. I mean, I like to fly, you like to fly, and that's our sort of passion. And I was quite well aware that you need something else. You need something else that you do. Podcasting, as you said, you're not going to become a millionaire because you're shooting out a podcast every week. But it does give you another avenue. And I think the payment that you get is I don't think we'd be having this conversation now if it wasn't for the podcast. And Craig Wood is on there. I wouldn't have got to know Craig well, and all these other doors that get opened up. So the payment.
Here's a payment that I want to share this payment here, because this is what you're talking about here. When people like Craig Wood, who's an established professional in the industry, says both the Bryan Air podcast and your show, Alex, have been very influential in my life. And I know for a fact on others too, and others also. Thanks, Craig. Those kind of messages really, you just need one or two of those messages and it'll drive you another 6 weeks. It really is amazing knowing that something you've built, let's face it, I don't know nothing. You bought a mic, you upgraded your computer, you learned a skill, and you put something out there. Something you have done, Bryan, has made someone look at themselves and think, wow, if he can do it, I can do it. So let's try something. Maybe not a podcast, maybe anything else, but a comment like that really drives you.
It's the most awesome thing in the world. It's certainly one of the most fantastic things I've ever experienced. And just little messages like that, or words of encouragement along the way. have just made it so obvious for me that this is something that is going to carry on, and not only just carry on in the direction it's going, but hopefully expand into the future.
Yeah, so let's talk about some specifics of the podcast then. So okay, so you say it's a nice crew room banter, and that really is, when I interview pilots, it's the same thing. Like you and I are sitting here talking about flying. Now we're talking about podcasting, just as fun. But that's the kind of message that you want to share. That, let's face it, we are quite an opinionated bunch, but also pilots have to work hard. The public expect a pilot to be professional, to do 80% or better in their tests, written exams, oral exams, or flight tests, handle emergencies well. So a pilot by makeup is someone who works hard and has a fair knowledge of things. So when we sit together over a beer or coffee in the crew room, when we talk about stuff, a lot of times it is just a bunch of nonsense, but sometimes there are some gems that come through. And that's the bit that comes through in the Bryan Air podcast. So, tell me about some of those kind of experiences with Brett and Ryan. How has it gone? We're changing the format.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I think one of the things I was quite aware of, if I'm going to bring anyone else on the show, it's going to have to be people that that can have a long-term impact on the show. And Ryan and I started at South African Express in 2010 together. We were sim partners. And we've been best mates since then, really. Brett and I have known each other for a long time. And the whole dynamic, I think it really works. Ryan and I, obviously being pilots, Brett has a bit of an aviation background, but he's not a pilot. But then he can level out the conversation from time to time when we start talking about that nonsense you talk about there, Alex. And It worked quite nicely. It was a challenge, Ryan was in the same position as me. I wanted to help him, and I thought, well, he can actually help me. Why don't we get this podcast going to another level? Let's improve every week. Brett has always been keen on starting his own podcast, so I roped him in before he could start his own, and I think the commitment is there now from us. We meet early in the morning, sometimes 4:35 in the morning we meet. So anyone that's willing to do that and shoot out a show, they committed. So yeah, I've got a great team. I couldn't wish for a better team.
Cool. And is it just the three of you, or do you have like a back-end tech support person as well?
No, it's just the big joke is that I have to take care of the editing afterwards and everything. When they go off to the pub, I'm still editing, but I would like a bit of tech support in the future.
I saw that nice post you put out a couple of weeks ago about you doing all the hard work. Very cool. And it's nice to have these little behind the scenes nuggets too. So if I go back to my journey of how do we get to this position where we are now, we're having a conversation on my show. It started with just a bit of put a couple of messages out and see what resonates. And it's the message I share with everybody when I do LinkedIn training from time to time as well. Put out a message and see how it lands. If there's some positive response, ask people to give you the feedback, what they liked in the message, or why was it a good post. And then, ask them the questions directly. And if people are giving you more questions in the comments, that is the market telling you, give me more. And the type of questions they ask, you answer them, and you use that to build more content. And slowly, you're heading down this direction. You've maybe turned 90 degrees off, but it's what the market's asking for. And if it's still within the mandate of what you're trying to deliver, then you share it. And that's how you grow and develop. And now you've got your crew room-based conversation. It's great. But the onus is quite heavy on you now to be up to date with the news. So how much of your time are you preparing for the show, and how much of the time are you making the show?
Alex, it's become part of my sort of daily workflow, I suppose, if I can call it that. But I love it because in a strange way, I feel more involved in aviation today than I did when I was flying the CRJ, as an example, because you're continuously trying to pick stuff up. People send articles that they think might be interesting for the show. And obviously looking on LinkedIn a lot at, what the trends are of the week. But it's great, it's just part of it. I enjoy that side of it. Look, it might change a little bit in the future. I'm not committing 100% to the format we've got now because I think, infinite mindset type of a deal. You must be able to adapt if the market calls for it. But no, right now it's okay. It is a lot of work, and it should be a lot of work. I don't think anything worth doing is just too easy. It should be hard.
Yeah, it should be hard. That's great. So this brings into Ayanda Nene is joining us from Los Angeles, saying, "Hi guys, listening from Los Angeles. Can you guys speak about CRM and what it means to be a good captain and first officer?" That's the next part of the good captain and first officer. And before I get your answer there, I want to just bring in this idea of, you talked about hard work. You've got a team of people working around you, and how we can answer this for Ayanda with CRM. So really, it is trying to get the best out of your team. So who are your team? Well, firstly, they're competent people. Secondly, they have skills that maybe you don't have. In fact, that you don't have. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. You don't need dead weight around. You need someone that's going to be complementary and different things to you. So how do you go about giving them the chance to fly, to be on their own and make decisions, and all for the betterment of the Bryan Air podcast for the team?
Look, that's a good question. It's a challenge, Alex, because as Brett and Ryan will tell you, I'm quite a difficult character at times. I come on a Monday morning and I say, guys, the lighting wasn't this, or Ryan, you've got to talk louder, or whatever the story is, and I think they roll their eyeballs at me sometimes. But as you say, a good team is one that can speak up, and we're quite critical of ourselves, and we get a lot of feedback from each other. We sit down afterwards and we have a debriefing. What can we do to improve, and not just the quality of the show. How can we promote the show better? What can we do? And we all play our role. Ryan is connected quite closely to the charter market in South Africa, so a lot of our followers come from his side alone, not mine. Brett is more involved on the business side of things, so a lot of his followers and connections, particularly on LinkedIn, are not in aviation, so we're able to tap into those markets. So it's a full-on team effort. A little bit like, you're not always going to enjoy flying with every single pilot you fly with, but you have to do what you can to get on with that person for that long pairing, whatever it might be, for the sake of safety and for the sake of the show. If you're just agreeing and they agreeing with me all the time, then we're not going to improve. We have to have proper conversations and be allowed to speak up and make mistakes together and succeed as a team.
And it's nice, this is one of the reasons why I got involved. Firstly, I was sharing the message of high performance teams on a post by post, a bit of regular content on LinkedIn. And one of the people that was regularly interacting with me reached out and said, "Hey, could you put this into a message and come do a motivational talk for us?" And I said, "Sure, let's do it." So, I don't know where to begin. If somebody came to you, Bryan, and said, "Hey, come give a talk at this company," firstly, can you do it? Well, I think I can do it. Then you decide you can. How do you set it up? What do you prepare? What do you charge? How does it look? All those questions come to mind. But anyway, it was a nice opportunity to learn a new skill, try something different, and stretch yourself, expand your skill set once again. But just coming through now, we've got another comment, which is, again, the reason we spoke of earlier, the reason why people we continue, gives us the boost. Tendo Madar saying, huge inspiration, you two, especially during such a tough time, and with some of our country's biggest airlines falling. I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue aviation, but you guys continue to motivate me to push on. Thank you and God bless. So Tendo, thanks for your message. Really, it really means a lot. It's these little messages, they really do boost you. But to go back to the analogy of aviation, so what made it so easy for me to deliver the message is that we can look at these flights as pilots. You can look at a flight as a project, from Joburg to Big Falls. That could be a little project on its own, and you could talk about the preparation phase and the real busy get-going phase and getting your arms, pull up your sleeves and hands dirty. And then there's a kind of slow and cruise phase, and then it's the busy phase as you wrap up and you round it all off with a safe landing and on time. And isn't that nice how we can package it in these little chunks of time? And we've been accustomed to do that for years and years and years. And again, a project like the Bryan Air podcast, you've got these little mini projects and the deadlines for this week. It's like a little mini pairing. And as you say, not all pairings are smooth. Not all pairings are trouble-free, and it's not always your first choice destination. But you get stuck in, and you get the job done.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, definitely not always easy. I just want to go back, Alex, and say to you as well. When I've started the podcast, obviously I needed a way to promote what I was doing now. So the first person I came across from an aviation point of view on LinkedIn was you. So I looked at this guy, I thought, who's this other South African guy trying to steal some my supposed fame here? But it was nice to see, because you had a big following at the time, which also told me, you see, this is something that has legs for the future. If Alex has got so many people following him, it must be something worth it. And I looked at your profile and your posts very closely, and I had to learn. Like anyone now. I've made it one of my sort of missions to try and encourage the guys, particularly my ex-colleagues, to get onto platforms like LinkedIn. And you don't necessarily have to post, but it gives you ideas as to what you can possibly do in the future. So if you're willing to take a first step, then I think that's a great way to do it. But yeah, I owe you a big thank you for giving me the slap on the back to push into that direction, because we need support along the way. There was one point, I remember it quite clearly, one evening where you got hold of me actually, and you said, Bryan, just giving you some constructive criticism. Your branding is, you don't quite understand branding. And that night I changed everything. And thank goodness you said that, because had you not, I may have struggled for a few more months until I figured that out myself. So you need people like yourself.
Well, thank you. Thanks for those kind words. And sorry if I came across a bit too brutish. It sounded like it landed well, but again, I'm learning too. And what I try and do, because there's been a few different people along the way, and one of us is joining now, a colleague of yours as well, Riette Stradom's joined the show, and she's also engaging with us. What do you do as a pilot? What do you do? Like, I've got these skills as a pilot, and if you look for something else, and this is pertinent to our friends and colleagues now, what do? You want to get a job somewhere, there's no flying job, so what do? Well, I can work in a bank or a bookshop or a bakery or anything else with a B, and you could do, but how do you promote yourself? What are your skills? Well, you can't say, I fly planes and I fly them damn well. You're going to say, I'm a professional operator. For 10 years, I have never, ever been a minute late for work. For 10 years, twice a year, I've interviewed and prepared for my job that I currently have just to stay in the same job. For 10 years, I communicate fluently. The team knows exactly what's going on. I brief well, I operate well, I debrief well. So you've got to bring out these specific things that pilots do minute by minute, day by day, so that other industries can understand. Because it's no good saying, when I land a jet beautifully, or I nail an ILS. Those words mean nothing to them. But communication, professionalism, on-time performance, keeping your head when the weather's all around you, Joburg summer afternoon, those are things you can explain, and those are assets to other industries. And I'm seeing it now. I got a couple of pilots working for me on a project now, and their approach to work and work ethic is brilliant. But I know them. I know how they operate. I know the mindset.
No, that's it. I mean, all we needed in the past was your logbook. That was your LinkedIn platform. If you wanted to get into a particular airline, another job, you took your logbook, you dissected the hours, you sent it off, and you went off and got a job. But if there's no flying jobs, then that logbook and those hours are kind of useless. But what you learned during those hours is extremely valuable. And you can't throw that stuff away. We operated in very difficult environments at times. High stress. You weren't always sure if you were, technical issues along the way. And we deal with them as we do. And we have a procedure. And I think the difficulty for so many people comes when you hit a crisis in life, particularly pilots. There's no procedure to fall upon. We're so used to working in those boxes, like you said earlier. And when there's no procedure, then things get a bit difficult. And that's where I think you need something to, put your head towards and to give it your all, because that can be your procedure. It just be, I'm going to work as hard as I can. And as Craig Wood always says, do something to the best of your ability. Just do it to the best of your ability. And that paves a path that, you need.
Yeah, that's the message I share as well on people that don't know where to turn. And there's another friend and colleague here, mutual friend, Mike Mason. The content that you, Alex, and Bryan released have kept me in the loop with aviation and its happenings. Thank you. Keep it up. Again, also doing something a little differently, but started to recently share quite a bit on LinkedIn, on social media platforms. And that's the point, is that look, it's easy to take a photo from the cockpit of landing in New York City. It's a beautiful thing, and most people will have some sense of wonder of a big airplane landing at an international airport. Okay, so maybe you don't have that, but that's only a small part. The part is to share something regularly, or just be involved in something, be interested. I've got another good friend, Fran, who's involved in woodwork and leatherwork and just learning a craft, creating something. Be someone who creates. You can only be one of two things. You can be a consumer, and then you must picture sitting on the couch with TV throwing at you, like you're just sitting there, or you can be the creator, the person making the content that is on the show that 90% of the world is then consuming. And really, it's the choice. Do I want to be a consumer and sit back and take it? Or do I want to be a creator and join the few that puts their work out there? Because it doesn't matter what you do, you'll find a tribe of people. You'll find your group that will love leatherwork, that will love meat, that will love baking, that will love understanding the details of finance or whatever it is. You will find a tribe. And if you put it in wholeheartedly, you can resonate with people.
Yeah, we've all got specific knowledge of some sort. There's not a person in the world that doesn't have some form of specific knowledge. And I think being creative, if you can be creative and you know how to sell, then you can be unstoppable. Then you can leverage anything. But it's you've got to take that first step, get busy, be proactive, and don't worry too much about the loss of that identity. The fact that you're not flying now doesn't mean you're not an airline pilot. I think that is such a difficult thing for most of the guys. Is you had a Bry, and the first question that anyone asks another man is, what do you, after your name is, what do you do? And for years, all of us were extremely proud to say, I'm an airline pilot. And then suddenly overnight, we're very embarrassed to say we're an airline pilot, because it's the equivalent of saying I'm actually unemployed right now.
Yes.
So, it's that identity that's tough. But, get busy and you'll sort that out.
Now, what do you say to people? Like, I'll share my experience, then maybe you share yours after that. I was very nervous, in the beginning. This was about 3 odd years ago. So I used LinkedIn very specifically for a time. I created a smartphone app. I wanted to engage charities on a very specific way. And I started using LinkedIn as a means to reach out to people and to show what this could do or how we could get involved in the charity space. And then every now and then I'd throw in a flying picture just because I'm a pilot. And I'd get like 10x the response, the photo of tending to a garden, and then you put a photo of an airplane landing. It just blows up. And so I'll do like in a ratio of 3 to 1, 3 charity, 1 flying, 3 charity. And eventually after a while I realized this is like, I'm got a split identity here. People don't know what they're following. And B, it's almost a waste of time. This charity stuff is not getting the results I want. But look at this flying, and maybe there's something here. And that was probably the first taste of the market speaking, saying, well, I want more of this. So when I started leaning in more there, I got to a point where I can't just put a photo of an airplane, because people could just go on one of the other apps and just look at photos all day, or they don't need me to post a picture on LinkedIn. I thought, let me just add some meat to this photo. So then I'd write a little bit. And I can remember one of the first times thinking, who am I? Who's this Alex guy who's sharing with the world, these 500 million people on LinkedIn? What do I know about airplanes? And I'm trying to now share my little bit of behind the scenes knowledge on the hydraulic system of an Airbus. And do I really understand it well enough to be teaching this? Are my colleagues at work going to read this and say, who's this Alex guy? Like, what does he think he knows? So I was very, very concerned that I would share information which was kind of right, understandable enough, but not quite all put together in the right way as an instructor would, or an Airbus test pilot or whatever. And I was very nervous of that. What is your approach to that phase? I mean, it was probably a couple of years ago for you two beginning the Bryan Air podcast, or now still you're doing these news articles and you're sharing your opinions on this new airline starting or this code share that's just kicked off. How do you approach that in the beginning when you, as anybody would, have this fear that people aren't going to like my stuff or I'm going to say the wrong things? Because I was nervous. What do you do?
No, also nervous. I still get nervous when I send out an article like that. I look at it a few times and think, wow, it's going to be really embarrassing if I only get 4 or 5 views on this thing. And no, it is nerve-wracking. I think what's hard is I think people like to see someone that does something else. So you can be a pilot and something else. People like that. I think they engage with that. If you and I just spoke about our time in the flight deck and all the wonderful destinations we've flown to, you're going to have a very limited, your content will be very limited. But like yourself, when you start talking about flying and high performance teams and the culture around a successful unit, what makes a successful unit, then it's a totally different story. So for me, I can talk about the news, aviation news, but to have an opinion on the news and to try and identify a trend or see what might happen in the future, I find that quite exciting. There is a level of embarrassment as well, because you almost think, I hope so-and-so doesn't actually read this post because he might laugh at me, But you get over that quite quickly. And I think the more you do it and the more you push stuff out, then it almost becomes expected of you. It's that initial phase that is hard. From then on, it's just a case of getting your work done, pushing the stuff out. And, my big constraint for myself is just make sure it improves. I mean, as long as it's improving, I don't really mind. And as long as you can keep getting input from the likes of, people like yourself and, Ian Findlay there, Craig Wood, all these guys that have commented here, if you get little inputs here and then, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? I don't think there's much that can stop you if you listen to those things and take them on and try and adapt it to your, daily workflow.
Yeah, you mentioned some good things there. So for people that are listening who also have this fear and not starting something because of the fear, this kind of debilitating, I don't know what to do to get through this threshold. It was the same for everybody. The first time they put out the first Apple computer or the Nike shoe or all those things, the people had the same fears, the same concerns. And it's just getting through that. A bit like hearing your voice recorded for the first time. After the first episode, it feels a bit funny. And by the 10th episode, you're actually looking for improvement in the cadence of your speak. And you don't even care about that funny factor where you hear your voice in your ears different to how you hear it in the recording. You just need to get through it and then just keep improving. Just start and do a bit of a course correction and improve and improve. I really want to encourage those listening who are sitting on something, because we're all sitting on some gem. We just don't know where it is yet. Just start. Just put it out there. I promise you, the fear and anxiety that you have for whatever you're concerned about is way, way, way less than the actual response you're going to get from the market. As I said, my colleagues and people I looked up to in the airline, I was very nervous. It was a bit like, that time where you throw that whatever, the hand grenade or whatever, and you're just waiting for that explosion. I kind of put it out there and I just waited. And I was blown away by the support that I got. It was completely unexpected. I kind of thought, as I said just now, I was going to get poked at and said, listen, what do you think you know? Why are you doing this? So who gives you the right to produce that kind of stuff? And I was nervous. And it was the opposite. They said, wow, that was quite cool. I like the insight. I like how you linked it up. And that was that encouragement once more. Was there somebody for you that pulled you aside when you put out that first episode and said, good work, keep going?
Yeah, Alex, you talk about those first episodes. I mean, I'm too embarrassed to actually go back now and watch those first. I just can't do it. It's just too embarrassing. And but I suppose just part of the journey. But there were lots of people along the way. I mean, my situation was, I suppose, maybe even a little bit different to yours, because I was at SA Express, flying the smaller gauge aircraft to a lot of your colleagues at SAA. So if I had to push something out, I was always worried there'd be a senior airways captain saying, what does this first officer on a CRJ know about this topic, you know? But that never actually happened. It was the senior guys that stood up and said, I like what you're doing. Sandy Bain sent me a message the other day to say, keep it up, you know, and it was little bits of recognition like that actually caught me a bit off guard, because you think it would be your closer friends that would, you know, call you and say, hey, great job. But it's actually the you know, from a distance. I've got huge support from a lot of guys flying at Cathay and Qatar that I've never met in real life, but man, they give me a lot of support online and a hell of a lot of encouragement. And it's addictive. It's totally addictive, and it pushes you. It gives you energy to carry on and go into other areas that you probably wouldn't have.
Yeah, no, it's great. Well, I'll put you on the spot quickly now. This is exactly down your avenue with the Bryan Air podcast. Tender Maddow again saying, Alex and Bryan, I wanted to ask, do you think the global aviation industry will pick up again? Over to you, Bryan.
Absolutely. Now, I've got no doubt about that. Aviation will pick up. For all the youngsters that are listening to us now, it might be a little bit leaner for the next couple of years. And to think that, you know, once a vaccine is out and things are going to go back to normal, I don't think it will. It's going to take a while. The freighter market is going to change drastically. I think the rise of e-commerce and even moving the vaccine around the world is going to change that market totally. I think you'll see a lot more pilots flying for freighters than you did. It could even become the norm to operate for a freighter as opposed to a passenger airline. But it's going to take a couple of years. You know, the shift has to happen, and then the cards need to fall on the table and see what happens. I think there'll be a few operators out there. We're seeing it now in South Africa with Lyft. They're looking at this situation as an opportunity. If there is an airline out there looking at new aircraft, and no better time to do it than now. It wasn't that long ago, you know, when you could not get your hands on a new generation 737. Now there's an abundance of them available. So absolutely, it's going to pick up again, no doubt about that. But it's not going to be tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I think that's wise words. What's estimate would you give in number of years to where we get back to last year's levels?
Look, I think conservatively, I would say 2024. What I would say is that doesn't mean that you're not going to get a job before then. I think there's a lot of the older guys that might look at this situation now and say, you know, do I really want to go back and do another rating, or get myself back into the left seat? So you might see a lot of the older guys, you know, retiring now, which creates some movement. And we saw it in, you know, September 11 came along. My dad was obviously running his airline, you know, during that phase, and that had a massive impact. And everyone said then it's never going to go back to what it was, and it did. So no, I'm very positive about you know, that it will go back. It's just a timeline. I would guesstimate 2024. However, the freighter market, I would say sooner than that. And I think the impact that e-commerce is going to have on the freighter market is underestimated right now.
Yeah, I think so too. You know, I hadn't really considered the vaccine until I was listening to your show the other day. But you know, shipping it around the world is going to be a huge demand. But just bringing it locally, as we kind of wrap up, last couple of questions on the local front. You know, we had a situation. I think there were 7 airlines. We had you know, SAA, Mango, SA Express, Airlink, Comair, Kulula, and FlySafair flying domestically. Well, the SAA, Mango, Comair, and Kulula. And SA Express not there anymore. There's only 2 airlines left. So great opportunity for someone like Lyft to come in, because even if you add Lyft in, we're less than half the capacity we were before. And surely if we say that people aren't going to travel around the world too much, there's going to be domestic travel for sure. Like Christmas time's coming, and people do generally head around to the coast and stuff. So what an opportunity. This might be, you know, the tonic that the South African market needs to boost flying again.
yeah, it's a huge opportunity, and not only just for new airlines starting, but for the likes of the current guys like Safair and Airlink. I mean, they've got an opportunity to really start expanding, and you might find Airlink in the future is not just a major player in Africa. They could be a major player in the world if they wanted to, because Africa is open to them. And Roger Foster's very ambitious. He's got the right aircraft for the time right now. So I think you could see massive expansion with the existing airlines. The same goes for Safair. I mean, I mentioned on my podcast, flying down to Cape Town a while back, the airplane was full, and the demand for flying is there. So I think we could see big expansion with the existing role players. And I don't think Lyft is going to be a Mickey Mouse airline. I think that's going to be a proper operation. They got the right people, and the plan looks very sound. So it'd be interesting to see, what they do to the market.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pilots available. You can fill that airline fairly quickly with the talent that's out there. Well, Bryan, it's been a treat having this conversation. I know it's been long overdue. It's awesome. Nice to get your insight. And again, we're just sitting a bunch of pilots shooting the breeze, and people can join in and share their thoughts as well, which is a lot of fun. How can people reach out to you, get hold of you, or sign up to your show? Where's the best place to find you?
Look, we're available, the Bryan Air podcast, available on all major podcast apps, so iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast content, find us on there. I also got a YouTube channel, so don't forget Bryan Air podcast on YouTube. Subscribe, you'll get everything on there. And then if you want to connect with me, ask me questions, I think the best place on LinkedIn. I check that the most, so shoot me a DM or anything you want, and I'll do my best to get back to you as quickly as possible.
LinkedIn, great place to connect. Yes, thank you. Well, thanks, Bryan. All the best, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you, Alex.